Hey guys, Dave and Len here. This is Wargame Chat number 9. In this episode, we're going to talk about miniatures, specifically the brands that we really like. Let's start with some of the older ones. Of the older ones, the ones I really like are Rail Partha. Rail Partha, I believe, is overall the best miniatures lines in history. You might get some figures now where they have slightly more detail, but for the time they had more detail than anyone else. They're anatomically correct, and the choice of miniatures you had was just fantastic. They had the biggest ancient line I've ever seen in my life. Any kind of ancient army you could think of, Rail Partha had it. A lot of my dad's ancients are from Rail Partha, and when I had ancient armies back in the day too, most of the figures were from Rail Partha, and their fantasy line was fantastic too, and they even did science fiction stuff like Battletech. Not only the big mechs, but they also had a 25mm line I called Battle Troops or something like that, which was essentially Battletech in 25mm scale. It was mostly infantry combat, but they've also had all sorts of miscellaneous figures over the years too. And Iron Wind Metals, which is not Rail Partha, it's just some of the employees who worked for Rail Partha, started their own company after Rail Partha went out of business. And they still have quite a few of the original molds that they had back in the day. So most of the ancient figures and old fantasy, you can still buy from them, so that's pretty cool. What about you? What's one of your...
Well, with Rail Partha, they were so good that they were endorsed by Xena, the warrior princess. She said that when she needs an army, she buys them from Rail Partha.
Did she really say that?
Well, I forgot to bring the ad that
Rail
Partha put out. But I'll bring it next time, so you can put it in. But that was a cute endorsement. Yeah, they had a lot of good stuff too. So, see, I mostly, the miniatures I bought, since everybody I knew either did World War II, Napoleonic Civil War, ancients, whatever, I concentrated on ships and aircraft. For ships, for a while, at the beginning it was mostly sailing ships, and Valiant miniatures were my go-to guys. Because it helped that they... at one time, the factory was close to my house, so I knew the ship. I should have just walked over there and placed an order and saved a few stamps. Yeah,
they've been to Little Wars a bunch of times too. One year their booth was next to mine. I think I bought a bunch of, not miniatures from them, but plastic bases they were selling, like a large amount of them.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think they're the ones that you could buy like enough to fill a kind of boxes the Chinese restaurants use.
Oh, I didn't know they were doing that, where you could bolt on the figures.
Somebody did that. They did that a few times. You could buy a whole just fill up a whole box, and they'll charge you about £1.
I remember when I was a kid. I think the convention was called. Might have been Milwaukee. It was a Wargame convention halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee, so they called it Milwaukee. And this company showed up there. I think they were going out of business or something, and they had 55-gallon drums filled with miniatures, and you could buy an entire handful for $1. This was decades ago, and the sculpting quality wasn't that great on the figures, but I mean, for $1 for an entire handful, you can't beat that. I had gotten a bunch that time. That's how I got started in painting, was painting those that I had gotten.
Yeah, and nowadays for aircraft, I depend on I-90 Enterprises. They're based in Michigan.
Oh, I know those guys. Yeah, they're at Little Wars too.
Yeah, they're at Little Wars. I was going to bring a sample in this week. They have one where you could mount it on this ball bearing, and you could put the plane at an angle, the nose and wings, but it's turning out it's harder to do than I expected. I found out I was doing it all wrong, and I have to redo it. Yeah, so next time.
They sell a lot of micro armor too and stuff. At their booth.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that there used to be several manufacturers. A friend of mine used to have these real small things. So. Yeah, I remember there was one manufacturer who sued another one for copying their airplanes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I thought to myself, with machines like that, the scale, at 1/300 scale, the wingspan's going to have to be the same. The length of
that's true. Yeah.
See, I forget which manufacturer. They deliberately made their Napoleonics like a couple millimeters taller. They're they're really 22 millimeters. So if they're sued by somebody for copying, well, Lee, ours is taller. Plus, also, they pointed out that being it's kind of thing is most people don't, they're looking at, hey, for some reason this looks good because it's 2 millimeters taller. They look until they put it on the table and stand it next to other miniatures. Some people complain, some it's not a problem.
Speaking of scaling, one of the miniature brands I collected for years and years, their fantasy line, it was Reaper Dark Heaven, the fantasy line. Wonderful line until one day they decided to change the scale without telling anyone. So they started coming out with new Dark Heaven figures, but they were clearly bigger, and I think I don't know if this was their official statement, but someone who worked for them said no, they're the same scale as before. They're still 25 millimeter heroic, which is what they call their figures. Well, I have a bunch of their old lizard men from Dark Heaven from like decades ago, and I've got some of their new ones, and you put them next to each other, and the new ones are like more like 2 heads taller than the old ones. So to say that they're the same scale as they used to be, that's not true. So they ruined the Dark Heaven line by doing that. I guess if you just collect the new ones, you'll be fine. But if you're like me, you've been collecting the old ones for years. I can't buy their new Dark Heaven figures anymore because they don't match with the old ones that I have. So if there's a miniature that I need, and there isn't an old Reaper version that I can get on eBay or something, I'll just buy like the D&D version or something, because it's not going to scale anyways if I get the new Reaper one. And they had a line that I used to like called Reaper Cav, which was mechs. And that was a really simple rule set. It was almost like a click rule set, but it was fun. But here's the problem with that. They first came out with the mechs, and then they decided they were going to change the scale of them. So the next version of the mechs that came out were larger and didn't look good next to the old ones. So if you had the old ones, you were screwed. I mean, you'd have to get rid of them and buy new ones to get everything to match size-wise. And a few years later, they decided, well, all the tanks, we're going to scale them up to where they're larger now, so they wouldn't match with the old ones anymore. And then they did the same thing with the airplanes, and they said enough is enough. I'm not dealing with these scaling games, which I think they're doing just to get people to rebuy merchandise they already have. So that's how I got out of Reaper Cav, is because of the scaling they were doing.
Well, that's one thing I was thinking of the manufacturers. Miniatures last a long time. I mean, these are not disposable things. I still have miniatures I bought like decades ago. And I used to be a better painter in those days too. And, it's like I bought 12 P40s once. I haven't bought a P40 since, so I haven't had a need.
Yep.
It seems like with me, once you get the fleet or the Air Force done, it's done. You don't have to buy any more for the rest of your life. So, and they got to stay in business somehow.
True. Another miniature line that's out right now for historical, Foundry, I think has the best, most anatomically correct detail on their ancient miniatures. They're just awesome, and they got some pirates and stuff too that look really good. Like the old Real Pertha, they're very anatomically correct. They didn't look like they had been pumping iron for years, because a lot of these, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of these modern historical miniature creators, the dolly they're using to create the sculpt, it's like the guy's like super muscular and stuff, which is not historically accurate. I mean, people didn't lift weights back in ancient times and stuff, and they didn't use steroids. I mean, the Arnold Schwarzenegger physique just does not look right on historical miniatures. That's why Foundry miniatures look so much better than everyone else's.
Well, that's true. When Arnold started his, was a weightlifting modeling career or whatever, he was unique because he was like very defined muscularly. The other guys just, the arm muscles were like a little bigger.
Yeah.
Because look at what's the guy who played Superman on television? He just, it's just the arms are a little bigger than average.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, another line I like now is the new D&D miniature line. It's a plastic line. They look pretty good. They're not as good as Reaper Bones as far as appearance-wise or detail-wise, but they're good enough and they're inexpensive. The only thing is, some of the ones like the gazers with the flying heads and stuff, it has a plastic shaft that attaches it to the base, and the plastic shaft visually, just after you paint the figure, just does not look right with a painted figure. I wish they would have just used a wire shaft to hold it on. I think that would have looked better. The plastic just doesn't go with it. But other than that, it's a good line. The scaling's a little bit weird. I mean, they're consistent, but like the size of the horses and stuff for that D&D line is huge. So I don't know if these are 32mm scale or 30mm or what, but yeah, the horses are the biggest I've ever seen for that type of miniature. What's some of the other miniature lines you've liked over the years?
Yeah, that's about it. Because like I said, when you get the Valiant, I didn't feel an urge to try anybody else. The only one I could think of is GHQ. I meant to buy some of their 20th century battleships. And, but yeah, they have one scale, I think it was 1/1200, real big ones, and I can't afford them nowadays.
Yeah,
and I also don't have the space to play.
GHQ, they also made a Micro Armor line, which was very popular for many years. I still got some of that buried in the garage somewhere.
Yeah.
Only problem with Micro Armor was small and inexpensive. The problem is the barrels and the tanks bent so easily.
Yeah.
Oh, where did you get those steampunk figures you had? Those weren't Reaper or Chronoscope. What were they?
Some of them were Chronoscope. I'm trying to think which lines, because basically I went to the local hobby gaming store and just looked down the old, see, okay, does that look like a good character for steampunk? And because I think who did that one? One manufacturer it's basically cowboys and Indian stuff, but this is steampunk.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, that Knucklebuster miniatures.
Knucklebuster, yes.
The guy who's always at Little Wars, yeah.
Yeah, because I bought a lot of those for the steampunk ones. And I'm trying to think, actually, for the steampunk one, I cheated and brought in characters from like the 20th century, the 1920s, because, all mad scientists look alike.
Yeah.
And a few femme fatales could easily pass for either period. So, and also your brand of your gang of ruffians. So.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll have a new topic for next week. Have a good one.